Today we're looking at the Joyo cab box cabinet modeling pedal. Big thank you to Canterbury Music Planet for letting me borrow this and try it out and test it out. If you're not sure what a modeling cab pedal or cab sim pedal is, basically just emulating or trying to emulate the sound of a real guitar amp. Whether it's a guitar amp with valves and tubes in it or a transistor amp, the concept is still the same. So it's modeling both the cabinet with the speaker as well as the amp and the tubes, as well as a few other features including EQ settings, the microphone position and placement, and you do get to choose what kind of microphone you want it to emulate within this pedal. So let's take a look at this. So let's power up the cab box. You'll notice at the bottom of the screen there is a loading bar, which does take a few seconds for it to load before you can start using the unit. I assume this is because it's loading up all the amp and cab sim presets so that when you're actually using the device, you can switch between all the different presets without any interruptions. On the front and back of the unit, there is also this really cool green LED strip, which does look really cool when it's illuminated. Okay, let's break down all the features and buttons of the cab box. We've got the master knob, which controls the overall output of the cab box, the selector jog wheel, which also doubles as a push down button so that you can choose and select different parameters. We have the up and down foot switch buttons, which allows you to cycle through the presets, and pushing both buttons down at the same time will enable a true bypass mode. Underneath the unit, there is a small switch which will allow you to activate or deactivate the LED light. On the side, we have a Midi input, so you can attach different foot controllers to control the device. On the back, we have a 1/4" jack input, which allows you to plug in your guitar or bass guitar. There is also a 1/4" jack through output, which is also true bypass, meaning you can send a clean, unaffected signal from the input source to a separate monitor or separate guitar amp. The cab box is powered by a DC 9V center negative power supply. There is also a USB port so you can connect to your computer to update the firmware and adjust some settings and parameters within an app. There is also a headphone output so that you can plug in some headphones and practice your guitar without the need of a guitar amp. There is a 1/4" jack output, which will send the entire effects chain from the cab box. If you didn't want to use the 1/4" jack, there is a balanced XLR output on the side, which also contains the effects chain of the cab box. The effects chain includes the power amp, cab mic, and EQ settings. And lastly, there is also a ground lift switch on the side, just in case you have any electrical interference. The master volume knob controls the overall output of the cab box. The up and down foot switches allow you to cycle through the 128 presets. The select jog wheel also allows you to cycle through the presets. Let's choose the power amp button. From here, we can use the select jog wheel to choose different parameters within the power amp settings. Pushing the jog wheel down activates the select button, and now we can choose whether or not we want the power amp on or off. We can also choose different tube settings, such as the 6L6, 6V6, EL34, and EL84. We can now select the overall input of the signal. I did find turning the jog wheel was a little bit tiring and tedious. I wish it would cycle through my parameters a little bit quicker. We can also adjust the presence setting, as well as the overall output from the power amp settings. Let's push the cab and mic button to have a look at these settings. Using our select jog wheel, we can cycle through different parameters, and pressing the button in will allow us to choose that selected parameter. From here, we can turn the cab and mic simulation on or off. We can choose up to 20 different cabs, which are inspired by 20 real guitar cab models on the market today. Options 1 to 20 are already loaded into the cab box, and options 21 to 30 are actually blank, which means you can plug the cab box in using the USB port into a computer and load in your own cabinet impulse responses. We can also choose a variety of microphones to be emulated as being used on the cabinet that we've selected. Just like the cabinet models above, all these microphones are all inspired on real microphones that are commonly used today. Once you've chosen your cabinet and microphone, you can dial in the overall microphone input volume. The C edge is the placement of the microphone, the lowest number being the microphone in the center of the speaker, and the highest number being the microphone closer to the edge of the speaker. The distance setting is the overall distance of the microphone to the speaker that you've chosen. The lowest number represents the microphone being close to the speaker, and the highest number represents the microphone being furthest away from the speaker. Now let's take a look at the EQ settings. Up the top, we can actually choose between a graphic EQ specifically for guitar or for a bass guitar, which means you can plug a bass guitar into the cab box. There is also a parametric EQ setting, and you can bypass the entire EQ setting as well. Using the jog wheel, you can select and dial in the frequency that you want to work with. Once selected, you can increase or decrease the settings to your liking. There are 5 EQ bands to choose from, as well as a low pass and high pass filter. If you decide to use the parametric EQ settings, there are 4 frequency bands for you to choose from. Once selected, you can increase or decrease the decibel ratio to that frequency, as well as the Q bell curve of that frequency. There is also a low pass and high pass filter to choose from. If we press the home button, we can see at the top of the screen the preset number, in this case preset number 1, and it also gives us a short description of the cabinet that we're working with. At the bottom of the screen, we have the power amp, cab mic, and EQ indicators. These indicators let us know whether or not these features are activated on our current preset. If I turn off the power amp, cab mic, and EQ settings altogether, and then go back to the home screen, the indicators now show that they are all off. If I cycle up to the next preset, you can see that the power amp, cab mic, and EQ settings are now back on. If I were, however, to cycle back down to preset number 1, those settings are still on, even though I had just turned them off. This is because I didn't save my settings. So there's a couple ways you can save your settings. First, you can go to the power amp and cab and mic and EQ settings and turn all the features off. Once you've done that, you can make your way to the save menu. From here, you can save your preset, or if you change your mind, use the jog wheel to scroll between the power amp, cab and mic and EQ settings and turn them back on or off. Down the bottom, we can choose which preset number we want to save our settings to. We can now scroll back to the top and click save, or push the save button down the bottom. This will take us back to the home screen, and we can see that the power amp, cab mic, and EQ settings are off. If I scroll up to preset number 2 and then back down again to preset 1, I can confirm that my settings have been saved. So this is the pedal here. It's very small, very compact. It is crazy to think that you could potentially replace a guitar amp on stage with something like this and create the same sound. It's not going to be exactly the same as using a real amp on stage, but they do come with some benefits of having something very small and compact, such as you don't have to lug around a massive amp with you everywhere that you go. Or maybe you're playing in a band that uses in-ear monitors and you want to hear your guitar feed direct to your in-ears. One thing that's really handy with having an amp and cab sim pedal is the fact that you don't have to use it on stage. That's kind of the beauty of it. You can just use your regular guitar amp, but having this tucked away in your gig bag is always helpful in case, let's say, the amp blows out, and there's something wrong with it, or you forgot to bring the the jug cord for the power supply for your guitar amp, you can just use this and have the signal fed back into your monitors on stage, your in-ear monitors, and it goes straight to the front of house. Even if you weren't planning on using this at every single gig, just have something like this handy just for those rare off chances that something goes wrong. What's great about it is there's a couple of outputs on the back that will allow you to send a true bypass signal from your guitar and your pedal board directly into an amp on stage. So you can still have an amp on stage feeding that signal directly to that. What you can also do on top of that is use one of the outputs provided. So there's a jack output here or a balanced XLR output, and have that sent to the front of house. What this means is you could use your amp on the side of stage as your own personal guitar monitor just for you, so you don't actually need to have that thing blasting across the entire stage, deafening all the other band members. It's just strictly for you. Meanwhile, the main signal is being redirected to the front of house as well as the monitors on stage or your in-ear monitors. So you can do it that way because this thing also recreates the sound and tonal qualities of a microphone. Or if you want to get a little bit extra, you can just use the output of this going to, let's say, channel 1 of your mixer, going to the front of house, and then using the through, which is a true bypass, go straight into your guitar amp and place a microphone on that guitar amp and send that to, let's say, channel 2 on the mixing desk. That way you can have the tonal qualities of your guitar amp on stage, as well as a whole bunch of other choices and other options from the amp and cab sim sent to the front of house and get a nice blend between the two. Depending on your setup, you choose the way that you want it to work. It could be a backup for you. It could be a replacement for having mics on stage so that you don't have to mic up your guitar amp, or you can have both of them. You can blend your guitar amp and the amp and cab sim. So I actually have my own separate amp and cab sim pedal, which is by a different brand called NUX. So you can check that out. I've already reviewed that and I'll put a link in the description. Basically this one and the NUX pedal that I'm using, they both do exactly the same thing. My personal preference is the NUX amp and cab sim pedal, mainly because I like the tactile analog knobs and switches that come with it, whereas this one has more of a digital interface. You do have some knobs and switches and buttons that you can push, but personally for me, I am not a big fan of having to press a button, cycle through the options, click another button, dial in my settings, and then click it again, and then push another button to save it. Whereas the other cab and amp sim that I'm using, it's more tactile. I just grab it, turn the knob, flick the switch, and that's done. The benefit of this one compared to some of the other pedals that I worked with is you can save your presets on this, which is really handy. Quite often I'll accidentally bump or start playing around with my sounds and effects and just the tonal properties. And then if I'm not happy with it, I need to try and remember what was my last settings. This one, however, you can save your settings, and there is 128 saves on this. You can have 128 presets ready to go. So depending on what genre, what style, what venue you're playing at, you can create a whole bunch of presets that work for you for different scenarios and environments. The way it sounds, I think it sounds pretty good. I haven't had any issues with it. There were a couple of times that I think the master output on this runs a little bit hot than what I think it should. I only needed it at about 9 o'clock on the dial, and as soon as I went past it, I started getting a lot of distortion quite easily, and then the further I went up, I started hearing a lot of hisses and clicks and some kind of dithering issues with the signal. I'm not too sure if that has something to do with my audio interface going into my MacBook, but when running this direct into the headphone output and then also at a modest volume and signal, it was actually pretty good. It sounds great. Like, I actually like it. It sounds fine to me. I would definitely use this at a gig for sure. Absolutely. A couple of features I didn't get to try out, mainly because it's not something that I prefer to use is you do have a Midi input here, so you could use a Midi foot switch controller to control the features of this. And there is also a USB input to control and create your saves, your sounds using a computer. Again, something you don't necessarily need because all the features are built into the pedal and you can access all of them through the buttons here. But the USB function is there if you need it. You can also use it to update the firmware if you have to. All in all, I think this pedal is definitely usable at a gig, especially if you're on a budget. If you're in the market for a amp and cab sim pedal with some microphone tonal qualities and features as well, go check this one out. And a big thank you to Canterbury Music Planet for letting me borrow this and test it out. So hope you enjoyed the video and I'll see you next time. Thanks.